Welcome to Optimal Health Weekly with your host, Steve Adams. This podcast is for highly driven professionals, CEOs, and entrepreneurs who know health is the first wealth. Join us each week for a mix of expert interviews and solo episodes on health topics relevant to your busy life. Let's elevate your health together.
Hi, this is Steve Adams from the Tiger Optimal Health Podcast, and today I'm excited to have our founding Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Matthew McNamee, on the podcast with us today. Dr. Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Well, the title today, I think people are going to find very interesting, is Beyond Probiotics, Advanced Strategies for Microbiome Enhancement. And our goal is we want to discuss cutting edge or maybe just solid approaches to optimizing the gut biome. Dr. Matt, talk to me about why should people care about whether their microbiome is healthy or not? Because a lot of people know a little bit about this, but not much.
Yeah, so the microbiome, particularly in our gastrointestinal tract, plays a critical role in our systemic health.
Mm-hmm.
So, it impacts everything from, our hormone regulation to neurotransmitter production. It impacts brain health. It impacts our metabolism, what sort of foods we break down, what nutrients we make, how we absorb them. It has a really big role in how it impacts immune function. It can turn the volume up on inflammation. It can turn the volume down. So it really impacts us from head to toe, brain health, cardiac health, pretty much every cell in our body. So,
yeah, isn't it something like 70% of the immune function?
Yeah. About 70% of the immune system's in the gastrointestinal tract. So the gastrointestinal tract starts in the mouth, it ends in the anus. It has about the surface area of a tennis court. It has the cell layer in the gastrointestinal tract down to the intestines is one cell thick. It's got the thickness of like a paper towel. It has these little proteins that hold the cells together called tight junctions. Those regulate what goes in and out of the bloodstream.
Wow.
Or into the bloodstream, from the gastrointestinal tract. So it works as kind of like a filter. And then we've got this mucus layer in the gastrointestinal tract that adds some space, and it basically keeps pathogens, bugs we don't want coming into our bloodstream. It keeps toxins out, and it regulates what nutrients we come in. And on the bottom side of that tennis court, we've got about 70% of the immune system. It's because that's the primary interface with the outside world. So a lot of us think, we interact with the world through maybe, what we breathe in. And that's true. Our skin and all of that. But the bulk of it is in the gastrointestinal tract. So it really is the gateway to health. Hippocrates said over 2,000 years ago, all disease begins in the gut. Dr. Les Pisano is a physician and researcher who teaches at Harvard, and he's basically found some of the mechanisms behind increased intestinal permeability, also known as leaky gut syndrome. This basically means there's inflammation, or one reason or another, that filter I was talking about in the gastrointestinal tract is damaged, kind of like having, your coffee filter damaged, and then the coffee grounds get into the coffee, which, we don't want. So, so it's the same thing. The bad stuff from in our gastrointestinal tract gets into the bloodstream. It stirs up all kinds of immune reactivity and inflammation, and ultimately chronic disease. So
here's what I learned. You'd be proud of me on this, Doc, because I am a businessman who's learned a lot from who we're interviewing today over the last 5 years. In my reading, it was the Dr. Natasha Winter's book on the metabolic approach to cancer. She talked about when we eat gluten. This was last week when we met. You commented how you were impressed that I just dropped it and haven't had it for almost 6 months. And a lot of people, you have to fight with them to get them to do it. Well, the thing that convinced me was what Dr. Winters wrote. She talked about those tight junctions. When you eat gluten, it's like a sticky thing that turns into a protein called zonulin, and zonulin breaks down those tight junctions. And now your filters go to pot. And because the gluten breaks down the tight junction, now the tight junction isn't functioning as a filter like it could, and that's how you get bacteria out of the bloodstream. And now you've got leaky gut. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so almost 100% accurate. So the gluten itself actually triggers. So zonulin is actually a protein that's part of those tight junctions I talked about that holds us together. And what happened is gluten triggers the release of that. So the protein, basically, that tight junction, that little link breaks.
Gotcha.
It ends in the bloodstream. It ends up in the stool. We can measure these different ways to actually see if you have, we can measure, see if you've access to zonulin in the stool, which is an indicator of intestinal permeability or leaky gut. We can find, so we can peg it. We can see it in the bloodstream too. So, but yes, it's one of the most potent triggers of the release or the breakdown of that gut lining is gluten.
Wow. Is it the uniqueness of the American market, how they engineer wheat and breads, that we have this problem, or is the gluten that's in, bread made in Italian bakery shops the same problem?
No, I mean, I was just talking to a patient earlier, and I would say 9 out of 10 people who react to gluten in our country go overseas, have, gluten in Europe somewhere, and they're like, oh my gosh. Like they were saying, I had all the pizza and all the pasta, daily.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
And it was great, no issues. So we modified the structure many years ago to be more glutinous, so it contains more gluten than what you get overseas.
Yeah.
And that's the problematic stuff. It's more protein dense. So I think one of the reasons back in the day was to be able to supply, to feed more of the masses.
Yep.
So modified. But I think the main mechanism is that we just have more, it's got a higher concentration of gluten in the stuff in our country due to how it's been modified. Okay. I mean, another factor that really, it impacts the gut lining, it impacts the gut microbiome is, things like glyphosate. That's ubiquitous even in the rain now, that a lot of our crops have on the grains, which is, wow. It's a toxin, right? And that can play a role as well. So,
yeah. So I have a question for you. One of the things that I've watched you do in the last 5 years, you've had some pretty significant success around freeing people, or at least improving their day-to-day life, that struggle with anxiety and depression. And what it seems like is the microbiome is part of the answer to that. Do you want to comment on that, about how balancing your microbiome and optimizing it can actually improve mental health?
Yeah, just for context, we have more microbes on and in our body than we do human cells. We've got 3 to 5 pounds of bacteria in our and other microbes in our gastrointestinal tract. They almost considered essentially an organ in itself due to the health implications and all the byproducts. Mm-hmm. Like 1/3 of the stuff or more, we'll still say, floating around, cruising around our bloodstream is basically stuff created by the microbes in our gastrointestinal tract, or metabolites and such. So those essentially turn genes. They if you have healthy microbes, you got a healthy human in a sense, right? So those actually positively impact our genes. When you have a sick microbiome, that negatively impacts our genes. You get a sick human, and then it turns the volume up. So if the stuff that's cruising around the blood is good stuff, it'll regulate inflammation in a positive way. If it's the bad stuff, it's going to turn inflammation up. And inflammation is one of the driving factors of things like, there's a lot of stuff in the scientific literature regarding, depression being an inflammatory condition, right? So, and if the inflammation is coming from your gastrointestinal tract, the individual I was talking about or seeing earlier today, we were talking about why her markers of inflammation are going up. And I was suspecting it was coming from her gastrointestinal tract, which is not uncommon. People that I see with any sort of mental health disorder, it's one of the things I think about is all of this stemming from the gastrointestinal tract. There's certain microbes that help us make neurotransmitters. About 95% of the serotonin is made in the gastrointestinal tract. We make a lot of GABA, which is like it's a very calming neurotransmitter.
It's inhibitory, right?
Yep. So it calms the system. We make dopamine in the gastrointestinal tract. There's actually more neurotransmitters in the gastrointestinal tract than in the brain. Wow. So if that's not healthy, it impacts the brain, right? So, and then one of the big, in my opinion, or potentially big driving factors of any sort of brain problem, disorder, it could be cognitive, it could be mental health, it could be anything else brain related, is if there is a breach in the barrier and that filter's damaged in your gastrointestinal tract, and you're getting microbes across into the bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there, and undigested food particles and toxins. One of these really, really potent toxins called lipopolysaccharide, we call it LPS for short. It's part of a lot of these certain bacteria, these gram-negative bacteria that we have in our gastrointestinal tract. It's one of the most inflammatory molecules that we can get in our system. And it does cause, a lot of times what happens with people, if you get like, quote unquote leaky gut, you can get a leaky blood-brain barrier. So meaning the filter that's supposed to keep the stuff from the blood, selectively allow things into the brain, that gets damaged. And then that stuff that's in the blood gets into the brain and creates a lot of havoc and inflammation. So, I'll look at that stuff in someone's gastrointestinal tract, and we find out if that LPS, that real inflammatory stuff's getting in the bloodstream, it's likely having a big impact on the brain.
Yeah. What are things that people consume that cause that to spike, or does it not get in there that way?
So I would say a simplistic, direct, causative kind of like result is right. If you're consuming gluten and it's damaging the lining, that stuff can. That's kind of a real easy. Now, like if you're eating a standard American diet, like eating a lot of refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, ultra processed foods, you're not getting enough fiber like most Americans. Basically what you're doing is you're starving the good guys that we're supposed to have down there, and you're feeding the bad guys. And these bad guys are what create this inflammatory toxin that everyone has. It's just supposed to stay in your gut. It's not supposed to get into the bloodstream. So that would be an indirect way where what can happen is that can create such an imbalance in the microbiome. We call it dysbiosis. It just means the teeter-totter's tipped. You've got not enough good guys and typically too many bad guys. That's just a simplistic version. Sometimes it's just too many bad guys. You've got enough good guys. Sometimes you don't really have any bad guys, but you don't have enough good guys. It's just the bottom line is it's not harmonious balance, right?
And when somebody has that, what are the common, I don't want to limit you, but like the top 3 symptoms that people come to you when you find out later they got severe dysbiosis?
So I've done probably thousands of these stool tests over the years. I will say that probably the people I've seen in the last decade and a half or so, maybe 20%, roughly, give or take, have a healthy microbiome. Wow. I would say bulk do not. And I will tell you that probably at least half of them don't have any gastrointestinal symptoms, completely asymptomatic.
That's crazy. Wow, really?
Yes. They don't have any gut symptoms, which is, it's something we'll maybe discuss down the road after getting some blood tests back, or we find their inflammation's high and we're doing all these other things and it's not coming down. I suspect maybe, and there's some other reasons that might indicate towards the gut. someone I was talking to earlier, we were adjusting, vitamin D levels, and they doubled that, since we met last, and the levels went down a couple points. And I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And she had other indicators that I thought there was a malabsorption issue where they weren't absorbing their nutrients and everything very well. And that, again, this just kind of points towards the gut. But for those that do have the symptoms, I mean, it could be anything from constipation. It could be, a little bit of bloating, loose stools, not uncommon. People get alternating, a smaller percentage, I guess. Some people get constipation and diarrhea, and it kind of alternates, more of kind of sometimes it's more of an IBS picture. But I would say bloating and probably looser stools are some of the most common. Some people, heartburn, it's another one.
Yeah. By the way, I had all of them when I met you. And you corrected all of that for me. Yeah, that's interesting. What about, is there a relationship between autoimmunity and gut health? Because I know we've had people come to us, and I've heard you and Dr. Kessler talk about they're highly reactive, like they're just reacting to everything right now. And if you repair the gut, can some of that reactivity come down, or am I venturing into a spot I shouldn't be talking about?
No, I mean, you can. So I was on a conversation I had with a patient yesterday. She wanted to look at food reactivity, do like a food allergy, food sensitivity panel.
Yep.
This last summer. And we had done a test to look to see if she had basically leaky gut. She did. She was really reactive to gluten, and we pulled gluten out and we're addressing her gut. But I just told her, I said, if we did that test now, there's a high likelihood that your results will come back lit up like a Christmas tree. Yep. To food, because the stuff you're swallowing basically ends up into the bloodstream where it's not supposed to be. And then
so it's like almost like a false reading.
Yeah, it'd be essentially I would venture to say the bulk of the markers that came back positive would be false positives.
Right, because if you fix the gut, then she won't react to it.
Not getting in, right? It keeps that stuff out, and then you don't have the reactivity. So, So on the autoimmunity component, that's where Dr. Alessio Fasano. I mean, he might, I believe there's something that he might win the Nobel Prize for his research behind this. But that's one of the big legs of autoimmunity is typically they all start in the gut. Mm-hmm. So most people have like a genetic kind of like weak link. And then the gastrointestinal tract is the next weak link. You've got the imbalance of the microbes, they create inflammation, you got damage to the lining of the gut, and then that 70% of the immune system on the other side there, when the gates are down and everything's damaged and things are getting into the bloodstream that aren't supposed to, it creates severe immune reactivity. Like you get
bullets everywhere, right?
Immune dysfunction, you start tagging everything as foreign, which isn't foreign, right? Right. And then you get the immune system starts to get confused. Typically, you have other triggers in there. Sometimes there's unique pathogens that maybe you have in your gastrointestinal tract or somewhere else, or foods or toxins that are essentially triggers that will drive the autoimmunity. It's kind of the three casts. It's kind of like the little bit genetic component, the gut component, and then the triggers are typically will drive that autoimmune process. So I start with everyone in the gastrointestinal tract that has, either they're on the autoimmune spectrum, like someone I spoke with earlier, not a full-blown autoimmune disease, or someone that comes and sees me with actually someone yesterday who came to see me. They've got an Hashimoto's, an autoimmune condition against the thyroid gland. That's one of the first places I start is looking at the gut. And then we look at triggers and stuff like that as well.
Would you say like a core part of the Tiger process is that you want to evaluate the gut with every client?
Most clients, yeah. I mean, if they were on board for it, I mean, it's not the easiest, it's not the most fun test to do. A lot of times we do a stool sample, but yeah, if I had that information, it would be valuable. in the beginning, it's they've done studies looking at, not only different chronic diseases. I mean, everything from, diabetes to cardiovascular disease, different brain, conditions or diseases to, all kinds of different chronic conditions that are associated with gut health, imbalanced microbiome, and then if you look at the blue zones, those populations they studied,
Right.
these people around the world that live over 100 years, one of the common themes is that they have this really healthy, diverse, abundant microbiome.
Yeah.
So we know that a healthy microbiome is critical for, health span and lifespan. So
Yeah. And so what, kind of closing this out, what are the steps that you usually take to, bring healing to someone's microbiome so that they can get the results they're looking for?
yeah, so if an easy way to kind of remember it, it doesn't cover all the bases, but basically weed, seed, and feed.
Weed,
So
seed, and feed. Okay.
yeah, so you basically get rid of the bad stuff.
So you weed out the bad bugs. Yep.
Yeah, the bad bugs, any toxins or problematic foods or medications. There's a handful of medications that can really disrupt the microbiome. Stress is one of the biggest components. I get it a lot with the people that I work with. It could literally just be stress, and that could wreak havoc on your microbiome.
Yep.
So you got to take out the bad stuff.
Yep.
Make sure that you have a functioning gastrointestinal tract. Do they have optimal digestive enzymes? Stomach
That's the
acid,
seed part, right?
health salts. No, the seed is the next step. That's kind of more that's why I said it's not all. It doesn't cover all the steps, but that's kind of a
Yep.
overview.
Yep.
So take out the bad stuff, replace anything that's missing. So those digestive enzymes and stomach acid and all that. And then the seed would be adding with things like, beneficial bacteria.
Yep.
So the probiotic, probiotics, the prebiotics, the fibers that are needed to feed the probiotics. And you want to make sure you repair the lining of the gut, the stuff that we talked about with all the leaky gut stuff. And then the last step is oftentimes not addressed with people, and it's a lot of times the most critical in keeping basically for long-term success. So that's kind of some of the fundamental things that we do lifestyle wise with our program. It's making sure that we have a diet that serves our health and our microbiome, and that we have a movement practice that helps the microbiome and the rest of our body, and that we have optimal sleep and optimal stress resilience, because stress can really damage, not only it affects your gastrointestinal tract from affecting stomach acid production to your immune markers, it can tank those, to affecting your gut motility, how quickly, that's
when I first met you, you showed me in my genetics that I hang on to stress more than the average person. And so because we were armed with that data, that motivated me to double down on my diaphragmatic breathing and my meditation and my daily movement, all those things that help mitigate stress. Because I can't take the stress out of my life. Most people can't. What you can do is have a different relationship with it and mitigate it on demand with these practices.
Well, and I think that I always tell people that the practices are there to build stress resilience. So when the hurricane comes, you bend like the palm tree instead of snapping like a toothpick. Yeah. So that's the goal, right? We become more stress resilient, and we change our relationship with stress. That's ideally the optimal goal.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, Dr. Matt, thank you for being on the Optimal Health podcast. This was super informative. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Steve.
Steve Adams here from Tiger Medical Institute, talking about the True Health Assessment. What if you could safeguard not just your health, but the well-being of your entire family? With the True Health Assessment from Tiger Medical, you can. Our comprehensive blood screening identifies hidden risks before they become major issues. Our elite team of Mayo Clinic trained and naturopathic physicians then create a customized plan to optimize your health for years to come. When you prioritize your wellness, you ensure you can be fully present for the people you love most. Don't let preventable issues cut that time short. For less than the cost of a daily latte, you can gain peace of mind and a clear path to sustained vitality. Protect your future and your family's future with True Health Assessment from Tiger Medical at thetruehealthassessment.com. Again, that's at thetruehealthassessment.com.